Welcome to Frost Sessions, the Frost School of Music's official podcast. On this week's episode, award-winning and legendary tubist Dr. Tindall interviews University of Miami swim coach and U.S. Olympian swim team manager, Coach Andy Kershaw. Prepare to dive into a spirited conversation about the surprising similarities between the world of athletes and musicians, the importance of discipline in practice and performance, and how champions are made in this week's exciting episode. Thank you so much for joining us today, and remember to stay tuned to Frost Sessions.
Hi everybody, this is Dr. Tindall. I'm from the Frost School of Music. This is my 6th year as the professor of tuba and euphonium, and I'd like to introduce our guest here. This is Coach Andy Kershaw, who is a world famous swim coach, and we are pleased to have him here at the University of Miami with us. I'll let him introduce himself here and a little bit of his program, but I think that we're in for a really unique experience as we kind of draw the parallel between some of our universes and what we're after with students and working at such a great university that exemplifies excellence and innovation in everything that we do.
Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, I'm honored to be here and really appreciative. I love music, have a lot of respect for what you guys do. I do think there's a lot of parallels. So excited to dive into that. I'm, as a little bit of an introduction, in my 8th year here. I'm proud to be a Cane and have been blessed to have some world-class experience, but I'm just super excited to be able to do it here at Miami and work with the people here.
Right. A place where you can swim year-round outdoors, right?
Absolutely. It's one of the few, and something that I'm from Ohio originally. Okay. And so when I first came here, I told myself not to ever take the views and the environment that we have for granted.
Right. Well, I'm a Michigan boy, so
okay,
I'm sorry that you're from Ohio, but but I totally understand about being able to be outside, 365, 24/7, and not taking that for granted, and the amount of sunshine and the exposure to such a great element that we get to experience, here in Florida. So, yeah, cool. Well, I'll start the podcast up by saying, it's always encouraging because when we're waking up early, what we think is early is the tuba and euphonium studio. We get up and we warm up most mornings, and we start at 6:30 or 6:45, so if you hear some low rumbles across the, south, west side of the campus,
Yep.
You'll probably hear the tubas warming up, but we already see the swim team. They beat us out there. They're out there warming up and working out together, and they're already in the pool before us. So I think they're right there. It's a little bit of a parallel reality that we share, that we're up at the crack of dawn most days throughout the week before the rest of the campus, So can you share with us about why you guys start that early in the morning?
It's a lot of it has to do with just simple logistics. There's student athletes, obviously, so primary reason they're here is to go to class, and we have a sport where it's just a lot of hours training, similar, I'm sure, to music that we can get into, and the logistics of training. Most days we train twice during the day, and so the logistics of getting in one of those practices before classes begin, and giving them an opportunity to refuel their bodies once that practice ends, just logistically kind of makes a requirement that we go that early in the morning.
Right.
It's,
right.
Physiologically, I think a lot of sports scientists would look at that and say, that certainly is a risk, especially for a student athlete who's staying up late at night sometimes to get studying in. So it really requires a lot of discipline on their end, a lot of time management skills on their end. Because that sleep is super important. And, if we could arrange it so that classes started at a different time, then, we would probably do that, but we gotta work around the class. And so that's why we start so early.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a similar thing, in my studio, I'm always encouraging my guys to get their fundamentals done. Think about, the physiological aspects of playing their instrument, and breathing every day, and all of the kinesthetic things that go into playing, and how and what and why we do certain things before they ever go to class, and then they have that time throughout their class to be thinking about those things, and then kind of go into this deficiency session. We can talk a little bit about how we maybe schedule our practice sessions for our students here in a second, but I would love to know, like what are some of the first things that you're trying to get your students to focus in on before they ever hit the water?
A big part of it for us is waking up their muscle chains and connecting different muscle chains, making sure that the joints are getting lubricated, getting some fire in them, some heat in them, so that when we dive in, I was once told that humans are not really made to swim. We have learned to swim. And so, hitting the water that early in the morning, and if we just jumped right into it, certainly could present some risk of injury. So, before we hit the water, they're coming on deck and taking that ownership to come on the pool deck and do certain warm-up exercises. We give them a general prescribed warm-up set of exercises, and then some of them have some adapted exercises that they do depending on their needs.
Right. So I mean, some mornings, I'll get there on campus early, and I'll have coffee out on the deck before my guys show up, and I'll notice that everybody's out kind of stretching together, or you guys do some sort of breathing exercises as well, right?
They don't do a ton of breathing exercises. It's certainly something that we could do that would benefit them. It's primarily stretching and rolling out. It's mostly muscular and joint, but there is a lot of value to breathing exercises that we could do as well.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's very similar how we start our day, with stretching out our shoulders and our upper torso, and, reaching up and blowing out, inhale and exhale through some different patterns. We'll inhale for 4 and out for 4 and in for 4 and out for 8, and just getting our lungs, warmed up for the amount of air that we move. Most tuba players are probably bigger specimens, of the male race. We have a few females that, I'm trying to always, with my female students, I'm always trying to maximize their air capacity. Same thing with my male students, so getting that air warmed up and together and collectively working efficiently, is a primary focus before we ever make a sound on our instrument, especially with the huge instruments that we play, and, so I think that's kind of a similar, reality that we have, in the way that we approach getting into our fundamentals, kind of leading into our day,
In the environment that we're in, obviously both in the academic environment where they all have classes as part of their day as well. Do you have certain things that you would love to dive into more, or work on more, that you kind of have to leave for them on their own? Because as you're saying that, I'm thinking, we would love to be able to do the breathing exercises and the stretching and the rolling, but ultimately we kind of have to select what are the top things for us to address, and then advise them on other things they can do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Absolutely. Every student, I'm sure that you see this as well with all of your athletes that come in. Everybody comes in at a different place, a different starting place. They're all trying to get to the same place, ultimately as a professional, or as an athlete, with the accolades and accomplishments that they're trying to earn and achieve. But yeah, I mean, there's only so much that you can do with everybody as a group and then individually. So I try to tailor the way that we work on our warm up together as a group, with their certain metronome markings, so we'll have different tempos that are selected for doing long tones or flexibilities or range studies or fingering studies, or dynamic studies. And it might not fit everybody in the entire group, but every week I'm trying to show them a different level of the bar that's expected for them to hit, or I'll be demonstrating first, and then everybody plays along with that exercise, or I'll go around the room, you play it, 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 and that takes 30 seconds to do, to go around the room and play the first repetition of whatever exercise that we're doing in this warm-up routine packet that I've created. It's called like Only at the U, Aaron Tindall's warm-up packet. It's pretty intense. It's 70 pages of exercises. Wow. And of course we cannot get through everything, so we'll go through that, and that kind of gives me an idea of where everybody is individually and everybody is as a group. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on, as a mentor, I don't know if you see things this way, but as a mentor, I'm trying to teach my students how to teach themselves. Absolutely. Right? How to evaluate themselves, how to be kind of detached from the person that they see on the recording device. We record a lot. My mantra is record, listen, fix. Record, listen, fix. And I don't know if you guys are videotaping yourselves or recording. I know you're recording your stats. I've got a nephew up in Michigan. He holds a couple state records. He's a junior in high school, so I'm a little familiar with the rigor involved, and there's always a stopwatch there, right? Absolutely. And they're always timing their strokes, and their turnover time, and doing freestyle type of swimming, stuff like that. So I'd love to hear you talk about, how do you evaluate a group of people and then individuals, and how do you kind of teach them to teach themselves? Because I think there's some parallels between our programs here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll go back and say, I'm impressed that you're able to lead them and demonstrate for them. If I was the one in there demonstrating for our women, we'd be a really slow team. So kudos to you. But yeah, we, a lot of it is trying to educate them on the process. Swimming is, or I believe a lot of that is what will take them to the next level. Right. Swimming can be a very workers sport where you can just get in and be told what to do and do it, and you can do it fairly thoughtlessly and reach a pretty good level. Right. And there are some cases where you can do it that way and reach a really high level, but I think that almost comes with a little bit of just natural talent. Mm-hmm. If you're most people, you reach that level and then it becomes, okay, you've already worked about as hard as anyone can work. So in order to continue improving, we have to really start fine tuning, and you have to really start taking a lot of ownership in some of these other things that you can invest in and improve on to continue seeing performance improvement.
Right. That's so encouraging to hear you say that. A big phrase that I use with just about every freshman during their first, or sometimes I say it till their second week of school. I say, okay, fill in the blank, whatever their name is, your natural talent has ran out. I'm calling your bluff on, all these different elements. This is about as good as you can, I'll have them play whatever it is that we're working on. Maybe it's they're working on their register, trying to get 5 octaves and all they have is 3. And suddenly they realize that a professional tuba player has to play 5 octaves. They have to be able to play every note at 8 different dynamic markings, every note at 8 different articulation markings. You start adding up the math. It's like 3,680 different ways to do something. I liken it to having a crayon box. If what we're doing is entering a coloring competition and a professional owns 64 Crayola crayons. Am I saying that like a Midwesterner? Crayons?
I'm with you.
You're following me. All right.
Absolutely.
And they come to college and they've got 8, or 16, or, and what are we going to do to shore up these deficiencies or speed up, maybe in the swimming world, speed up our times, so what are some of the things that you can do to help a successful athlete speed up their become more efficient with their with their maneuvers or with their abilities in the pool? What are some of the
I think as you said, they're all coming in as I love that analogy, the package of crayons. But they're all coming in with like a different combination of colors.
Right.
Some have the fire engine red brick, and others have a different red.
Right.
And so working within their puzzle and trying to figure out where is this person coming in and what are the things that they can improve on, or the things that they haven't touched on yet, to really maximize that improvement. It's one of the things that I will say to them often is, imagine that we can divide yourself into two people. And person A is the person who has already achieved everything you've achieved. Person B is the person who's now starting this next year, this next season. And at the end of this season, imagine that person A and person B are going to be having a discussion about, and person B is going to be saying, well, I worked really hard this year. I'm sure that I'm going to go faster than you went, person A. I said, well, if you own what you were as person A is going to have a pretty passionate argument that they worked pretty hard, and it's going to be pretty hard to outwork them and outdo them. So, you got to think through, okay, what are the without a doubt arguments that you're going to have as person B to win that argument without a doubt over your previous self. That's going to convince you and yourself and everyone else that there is no question you're going to go faster this year.
Right.
And, I think every season that could be a different thing. Certainly there are seasons where they could look back at themselves and say, well, I didn't really work that hard that year. I was lucky to get the results. Okay, so it could just be hard work. But, we try to focus a lot more on the elite side of it. So looking at like stroke rate and stroke tempo, stroke tempo for us, and then like distance per stroke efficiency. Just those two factors alone, a small improvement can have an enormous impact on their ultimate performance.
Right.
So ultimately, we're trying to figure out the ways to improve those two little pieces just a little bit.
Right.
And then when that happens over the course of an entire race, that can have a huge impact.
Right. I mean, that's so cool to hear you say that, because, in my studio, I'm always telling my students, all I care about as your teacher is that you just become that much better than you were the day before. And then the next day, just a little bit better than that. As long as you become a little bit better at what you were doing than you were the day before, that defines success for me as your teacher, and we kind of look at, goals, it's a two-way street, isn't it? Even with athletes, working with a coach, you got to make sure that it's a good fit, that you get along with the student and they get along with the teacher, because you're on this journey together. Absolutely. And, and it's kind of like a marriage in some ways. The worst marriages in the world fail because that level of expectation, wasn't communicated, appropriately, or you had different expectations out of each other, as a teacher and a student, and I've seen and been through some of that with some students that I thought were really, really maybe self-motivated, and they expected me to motivate them, the most, So there's a book that I have my students read. Everybody that comes to my studio reads it at some point. And it's by Daniel Coyle called The Talent Code. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. Okay.
I have heard of it. I haven't read the entire thing, but I have heard of it and have read some of it.
Right. And he talks about, and the innate ability to keep that ignition switch on. When you face a failure or you face a setback or, we get into, what I call like a long grinding, period of your life or of your career where you don't feel the success rate and whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, that you hang in there tough and, nobody's turning off your light switch for your motivation. Because at the end of the day, we're not in their practice room with them. We're trying to teach them to be self-critical and to evaluate themselves, but at the same time, stay motivated all by themselves, And, so I'm curious to know, like, your approach on those kind of self-ridden issues maybe that you experience with your athletes.
One of the things that we're fortunate to have is the numbers, as you kind of referenced. And for us, we can put so many numbers to so many things, and it's very quantifiable. 50 meters is 50 meters, whether you're doing it when you're 14 or 22, it's right. 50 meters is 50 meters, whether you're doing it in Miami or you're doing it in Sweden.
Right.
And so we, one of the things that we can see if you look at swimming trends, and this is true swimmer after swimmer after swimmer, there are periods of sharp improvement, and then there are periods of what appear to be plateaus. So for us, it's largely driven on what we refer to as their best time. And you'll hear swimmers oftentimes say, well, I added 3 to my best time. I added 3 seconds. That time that I raced it, I was 3 seconds slower than my best time. And one of the things that I will point out to them if they do feel like they're getting into a little bit of a rut and, I maybe sense that they're starting to get a little too discouraged, is every swimmer goes through those plateaus. But what we look for is during the plateaus that their swims that are not their fastest, that those are getting closer to there's less variance between their fastest time and their times that are not their fastest, or that we're not quite as prepared to go as fast. When that variance starts to shrink, that typically is when we're about to see another big improvement zone.
Do you ever find that you're correcting maybe a really talented student that comes in? Maybe they're fundamental, maybe it's the way that they, bend their elbow or their wrist cuts back into the water, or maybe it's lowering, the wake level in their lane or whatever it is, and they might feel like they take 2 or 3 steps back to eventually get, 1 or 2 steps ahead of where they were at. Because I get that all the time. I get a really talented student and they get 1 or 2 shots to really impress you, right? And they want to come to the U because it's Tuba U, right? And everybody wants to be there and part of the studio, and you take the best students to come and join the crew. And then you get this talented student, you're like, oh, we're going to have to, readjust this embouchure, or you smile as you go higher and that's stretching the lips out, or, suddenly you cut their range. They have a 4-octave range and now they've only got a 3-octave range or a 2-octave range, or they used to be able to play this difficult repertoire in literature to a certain level, but now they physically can't play that and they've got to take a step back and do the program that I set them out on, So how do you deal with that struggle with setting the athlete back a couple steps?
And that can be a risky time as a teacher, as a coach, right? So yeah, I think, for us, we're always trying to make those changes, and I would say a very minute kind of incremental way. I've seen enough swimmers achieve at a really high level that are not doing it the quote unquote textbook way. Maybe their technique is slightly different, but it's something that works for them. And, it might be something that has to do with their muscular balance or their flexibility or something. And so, we try to make those changes pretty small and really spend some time evaluating. And there are some that we're pretty confident in that if they can take the time to make this change, if it is going to take a few steps back, eventually they're going to have to figure out how to do that in order to really get to that next level.
Right.
But then there are other changes where, it's a little bit more of an experimentation, and we'll try it and then use our coaching eyes and the stopwatch. But I would say more so the coaching eye, because like you say, the stopwatch, they could go slower in that initial phase of changing.
Right.
And so just really looking at, are they going to be able to master this from a muscular standpoint? And is it worth doing that?
Doing for the long term, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same type of thing, for instance, I mean, just talk about, I'll tell you, through this period of COVID, there's no concerts. So I'm kind of in a dead period, and I felt my teeth shifting, right? And they've been shifting for a little bit over the last 2 years, and I was losing some of the flexibility in my mid-register and stuff. So I've been doing Invisalign for the last, I've got clear braces on right now, and I'm nearing the end of my time, and it set me back a couple steps, but to ultimately get me forward, it was something that I was willing to do, so I think, I don't go that drastic with all of my students, say you've got to get your teeth done, but there are certain ways that you can play the instrument that are only going to be efficient for so long, or having a long-term career. If I'm going to play and teach for another 30 years, those were things that I knew that I had to seriously invest in, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on, it sounds like we're a little similar in our approach of kind of like having a cookie cutter model that we want our studios or our program to follow, but yet being able to kind of tailor, a certain approach for that special student, that has, such a unique ability, and that's the reason they're at the U, working with us. That's the hard thing for me as a teacher, is taking my cookie cutter top down approach and then specializing something for that unique student.
Absolutely. And honestly, as a coach, that's one of my favorite things, is trying to blend that in and almost make it so no one notices.
Right.
That everyone feels like there's an equal amount of this program is the program, and there's little pieces of it that are for me. And I know for our team, they each really enjoy that feeling of something in here is specifically for me, and I'm part of the overall program. And by having it just a little tailored towards me, or maybe this practice I wasn't necessarily tailored towards me, but I know that 2 practices ago that was really thought through from my perspective.
Right.
Having that excitement of the tailored to part, but also the pride in being part of the bigger thing. Is certainly a huge part of it.
Yeah.
And then, the other thing that we have done that I doubt that many of them really realize is we tailor the program based on the team makeup. Sometimes we're very sprint heavy, and so the overall program might be a little more sprint oriented. Then there are other times when we're very distance heavy, and so then the overall program might be a little more distance oriented.
Right. That sounds like us. There are times, like the International Tuba Euphonium Association, they have a conference every 2 years, and then all the solo competitions or the mock auditions or the jazz competitions or whatever it is. So the whole focus of what the studio is working on comes up, or then the big orchestra audition comes up, and then everybody's playing all the orchestral excerpts, so we need a different approach, maybe even in our warm-up session, tailored kind of to suit, what it is that's coming up that we're after, that we're trying to accomplish and win. for the students. I mean, that's pretty cool. I mean, I'd love to kind of transition, to how maybe you view the swimming pool as like a performance stage, because I'm always telling my students, if you wait till the day that you get on that stage to raise your level of expectation of yourself just that much more, you put that much more pressure on yourself, and then suddenly you're not able to control certain elements that have came into your orbit. You haven't practiced controlling those things because you raise the level of expectation of yourself on that day. So, I'm always telling my students, you've got to keep this level of expectation of yourself incredibly high. And I give them a list of 10 things to listen for. The evenness of their sound, the fronts of their notes, the releases of their notes, the lengths of their notes, the shapes of their notes, time, rhythm, and pitch, asking themselves if it's smooth and cohesive musically. And then number 10, does their musical line have sweep, line, and drive? So I'm trying to give them these elements to kind of think about throughout the day in their practice sessions, and to, when they're recording themselves, and a way to kind of levitate their general level of expectation of what they expect to come out of their bell at any given time, so that it's not such a surge of emotions and anxiety on the day of the actual competition or the audition, when it really comes, you get one shot when it comes down. So how do you get your swimming pool, to be that performance stage? Like, we're trying to get our practice room to be the stage, for our students. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I'm happy to share. One of the things that as you were talking, though, gave me great respect for from my viewpoint, the abstractness of what you guys are evaluating, because it's a lot based on what are you hearing and what are other people hearing from my layman's interpretation of what you're saying. For us, I almost wonder if there would be times that there would be value to turning the clock off and requiring them to, okay, was that better? What were you better at this? Was that faster? Because they rely on the clock maybe too much, in that regard. But certainly the stage question and that topic, that's something that we battle. And our sport is such a grinding sport that it is really easy to lose that appreciation for, okay, I'm back on the pool deck, it's dark out, it's 6 a.m, and I'm tired, and I'm getting in to do this practice. Am I treating it like my performance stage?
Right. Yeah.
And we as coaches try to work hard to remind them and to try to create the right environment when we have practices where they can turn off, and it's more just about the aerobic, building the aerobic part of it, where they shouldn't be in as much of a performance mindset.
Right.
But then there are other practices where we are really, really encouraging them to get to the performance mindset.
Right.
But that has really been trained out of them as they come up through the sport. And Tanya and I, our assistant coach, and I are oftentimes trying to come up with different ways to invoke that. This is the performance. This is the time to flip that performance switch on.
Right. I mean, it sounds so similar. I mean, there's times where I can sense some of my students get burnt out. Maybe it's because they're studying with somebody who's Dr. Intensity. You're a little bit, I'll admittedly so, at times. But, I mean, sometimes they burn themselves out, and I'll just say, okay, let's take a step back. Why is it that you fell in love with music in the first place? Do you have a song or a piece of music that inspires you, that you just, love to play because you love the sound of the tuba? We can never lose sight of that while we're going through the emotions and, the hard rigor and the investment that it takes to get to be a professional, level of anything, about why we fell in love with what it is that we do in the first place. Because if you love what you do, it's not like I don't feel like I'm going to work. It's just what I love to do, And I can think back, I mean, I grew up in the water being in Michigan, being on a boat every summer. And, we live in Sarasota, as I played in the Sarasota Orchestra, and we love to go to Siesta Key and Lido Beach. And, I can imagine maybe as a swimmer, maybe they fell in love with the ocean or just being in a friend's pool or, in a lake or, I mean, do you ever talk about those kind of parallels with your students and tell them to just chill out and hang out in the pool or?
And there are times that we encourage them to find that connection and connect with just that. Many of them really have a love for being in the water, as you referenced. Mm-hmm. And so having that, connecting with that, reconnecting with that, spending time just floating or underwater. Right. A lot of times, it's not, that's typically not coming up during our heavy training time. That might come up as, we're getting close to like one of our elite performances.
To kind of take some of the pressure off and maybe chill them out a little bit? Or?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But then the other thing that we I'm constantly trying to remind them that we can be a sport that focuses on the practice and the games kind of come up, but the focus is the practice. And I'm oftentimes trying to remind them that we are doing all of the practice for the game. Right. And, we need to have the focus be on the game, and the practice is what leads to that. Right. And if they're more focused on the practice than they are the game, or they have a better love for the practice and maybe more of almost a fear for the game, then it might be better for them to be there. Swimming is a great sport that you don't have to do competitively.
Right.
And you can do that at a fitness level and work out really hard as a swimmer.
Right.
But that is not what we do as, a member of the ACC, the NCAA, trying to do it at the level that we do it. You have to crave that game.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You said two cool things there. You're talking about like putting that focus onto those fundamentals while the event's coming up, and the event's getting closer to them, probably on the calendar. A year or so ago, the Florida Orchestra had a big principal tuba audition, and tuba players will sit in an orchestra for 30 years, and until they retired, and there's only one tuba, an orchestra. So there's only 35 to 40 of these spots in the country, right? So it's a highly, when a job that presents a livable wage comes open, everybody's going after it, so this audition came up, and all of my students, man, they were gunning for that job. That was like on their radar for the entire year. And one of my 20-year-old students, one of the youngest people in history to win one of those jobs, actually won that position. But even on the morning of, a lot of them were here at our place crashing the night before, so it was a short drive up to Tampa. And they were out in the yard in the morning doing their warm-ups together and focusing on their flexibility and doing their dynamic studies as a group, and I just, it was kind of like a proud teacher moment. It was like, these kids get what's important. Even on the day of the event, they were being meticulous about how they started their notes and having that control over every aspect of their playing, and then playing, I heard a few of them playing melodies and playing stuff that they like to play to maybe kind of ease their mind or ease their ability, So that was really cool to hear you say that, because I can totally relate to that, when we're on the road or the stress levels coming up to keep that routine alive,
Absolutely.
Be an integral part of who we are.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I just experienced that. We have 3 swimmers who are going to the U.S. Open this weekend.
Wow.
Okay. And so
where is that at?
This year, because of the COVID situation, they have divided the meet into 9 different locations to help keep the size of the meet at each location small. Yep. And so the one we're going to is actually in Sarasota.
Wow. Okay.
Yep. And Isabel Trava is one of the swimmers going.
Very cool.
But one of the other swimmers that's going, I had wanted them to take this morning off, and she really felt like it would help her stay in her routine by coming in this morning. And so I allowed her to do that, and she promised me she would get to sleep early, get good sleep.
Yep.
And it really did help. So yeah, staying in that routine definitely is a big piece of it.
Yeah, keeping that familiarity, I kind of want to shift. I mean, for our viewers here that are going to watch this, I call you Dr. Andy, Coach Andy, might as well be a doctor. Do you have a doctorate?
I do not. I do not. I got my master's degree, but not my PhD.
Well, we'll get you one of those honorary ones here. I mean, you have the
great.
You have the accolades to do it. For our viewers here that are probably watching, Coach Andy, you've been at the Olympics. You've been the coach at the last two Olympics in 2012 and 2016. So you've seen, I mean, not only at the U, but on the world stage, the creme de la creme, the top of the profession, So
a slight correction. I was the team manager. And so was not a coach.
Okay.
Certainly am a coach, and it has impacted my coaching a ton.
Sure. Right. But even being there at that level, though, I mean, you were there and you were a big part of those team success, I would say. What do you notice at that Olympic professional level? I mean, what are the little differences that you notice between the student athlete and the ability to clench the gold?
Some of it is what we've talked about, that they have that ability to take ownership of all of the little things that make such a huge impact, whether that's stretching or recovery or nutrition. Some of those things, they master all of those things.
Right.
Certainly it's a lot of hard work, but one of the things that I noticed right away when at one of the training camps, I think I believe it was leading up to London, is a lot of swimmers have a really good natural feel for the water. And, if you watch a swimmer swim, especially at a slower speed, you can just see them almost, like massaging the water and really having a feel for the water. But when they go to their fastest level, they get more and more tense and lose some of that feel. With the most elite, with the Olympians, no matter what speed they're going at, they have just a natural feel and flow in the water. And that is, you think about a hand grabbing the water, the more flexible it can be and the more feel it can have, the better it's going to hold a substance like water. Whereas if it gets hard and rigid, it's like pushing a rock through the water versus grabbing water with like a parachute.
Right. Totally. I mean, that's so like, performing. It's like I tell my students, think of the best performances that you've maybe sat through and listened, and what your takeaway was. And 9 times out of 10, they all say it was just effortless, for the performance, or the performer made it seem as if they were totally effortless sitting there on stage, doing whatever it was that they were doing, even if it was the most technical performance or maybe the most romantic performance that they've sat through, for something that really moved them. They didn't feel like the performer was working that hard. And that's always my message. We spend so much time doing fundamentals and drills to, until it becomes muscle memory. The way you do anything is the way you do everything, is what I always tell my students, and consistency, is authoritative. When things are authoritative, people pay attention and listen to you, so you're watching like an authoritative performance in the pool, just like we'll listen to an authoritative performer on the stage. It captivates you, it keeps your attention. It keeps you tuned in to every single note, just probably like, watching Michael Phelps in the pool. You could just stare at that guy's stroke the whole entire time and be like, wow, that's a thing of beauty, right?
Yeah. And, that's the other piece, is someone like him, someone like a Katie Ledecky, some of those people, the other thing they have is they have a switch that allows them to I would say, disregard their body's signals and go beyond limits to get to the wall first. I mean,
wow.
Phelps, he wins. And I think to some degree, you say that consistency is authoritative. I love that quote. One of the things he learned to win and had very little experience losing. And I think to some degree that was part of his consistency, is that when it came to the end of the race, he didn't know how to lose. He only knew how to win.
Right.
And
he knew what it felt like to win.
Absolutely.
And we were talking about that earlier. Sometimes turning off that clock, right, is good for your students and your athletes, because they know, not only do they know what, like I talk about with our students, do you know what it just feels like to when things are correct? You know that feeling of, yeah, that was it. Yep. Not this self-critical being analytical the entire time, but do you just know what playing a great phrase feels like? Do you know what it feels like to play with very little to no effort? That's when that muscle memory is there and things are clicking, and that work that you put in every morning, like I want my students to think about that stuff in the morning, but then throughout the day, I want them to think about being a musician and turning phrases and turning off that self-critique. So,
and that was another thing that I would say Phelps was one of the most analytical and well-educated swimmers I've ever been around, in that he immediately after a race would know if that was it or not. And he may have had success when it wasn't it, but he still knew the things he could have done better, or the things he didn't hit quite the way that he wanted to hit.
Right.
And also a quick little side note, his coach, Bob Bowman, is an avid musician and really, really into the music process, and draws a lot of parallels between music and coaching his athletes.
Yeah. Have you ever read a book called The Inner Game of Tennis by Dr.?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Yeah, that's a book that a lot of musicians, recommend, in our inner circle, to other musicians to read. But there are so many parallels, I think, just between, what it is that we do, and I hope that our listeners are picking up on those, as we draw those out. I kind of want to, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think a world-class mentor or coach looks like from the outside looking in, and then from the inside looking out. I don't know who you've worked with or who you mentored under, and who you've been around. I had the distinct pleasure to study under some of the absolute best people that there are, and I'm so thankful for the mentors that I had, and they're all these, I don't think that I teach just like any one of them, but I think that I bring a little bit of all of them into my approach and my program. And I could probably draw out on a sheet, or list some characteristics of each of them. I'm really curious, in the swimming world, what would you say are some of the characteristics of a world-class coach and mentor?
That's a difficult question. There are so many different approaches. I'm sure there are in your realm as well. There's the authoritative, there's the caring, etc. I think probably the key piece is that they care as much as the people they're working with. They're as passionate, if not more so, than the people who they're mentoring. And they care about them in many ways, not just that sport performance, but care about them as a very well-rounded way. And they're able to connect with them and help coach them through their journey, and help get them from point A to point B using the tools that person will connect with.
Right. Yeah.
But then getting there, I think that it's just, there's so many different approaches. Someone who I consider one of my favorite and most crucial mentors is a coach by the name of Greg Troy, who's been one of our he was the head Olympic coach in 2012 and was the head coach at the University of Florida for a long time. And I always find it so interesting when I have a conversation with him. He and I will oftentimes have similar views of a situation and totally opposite ideas on how to approach it.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I just think that's just so prevalent.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're all trying to get to the same place, aren't we? You're trying to get to the wall, we're trying to get to the end of the phrase, or, doing things. And there are different pedagogical ideas of how to get there, and I always find that, really, to be a unique thing in the music world. There's so many different approaches to learning how to do something. And sometimes there's no right or wrong way to do it, but that we help the student get there, and I think also, sometimes as a professor or a life mentor, I call myself, you end up, helping them with things other than music or other than swimming, and you mentioned Isabel Traba. Her parents are actually good friends of mine, and her father, Fernando, and her mother, Betsy, they're principal bassoon, the principal flute, and the Sarasota Orchestra. And I think you might touch upon, what it is to be a successful parent, because I notice a huge difference in the students that I have that have supportive parents. It's almost just as hard to win a professional job as a tuba player. It might be easier to be an NFL quarterback. So having that parental support behind you, is key. And I notice such a difference in the students that have it and those who don't. And the students, whose parents really believe in them. So maybe you could talk to us about, I'm sure there's some parents that are going to watch this. What is it, to be a promotional parent or a supportive parent.
I mean, so much is dependent on their confidence, and I think that's something, I don't know if it's generational or what, but a lot of them don't just have that innate confidence, and they need some of that confidence in order to have the success. And one of the things that I've learned over the years, and one of the things we will tell the parents when they're living in the house before they get to college, they're unloading pieces on their parents. They're unloading some of their whether it's frustration or discouragement or whatever, in little increments. When they get to college, it all comes out in one phone call. And as a parent my daughter's still in the house, I can only imagine that your first reaction is, well, that's not right. I'm going to call the coach. They're treating you wrong. And I can totally respect that initial reaction. But it's just so important for them to hear on the other end of the line, I understand, I'm sure it's hard, but just remember you're in the middle of a process. You're not at the end of a process, or there's something you can gain from this experience, and go talk to coach and he will help you see the value in the experience that you're going through.
It's unique to hear you say that. I just had a student, we probably had a rough, I won't dispel any names here, of course, but somebody in the student, they just had, a rough 3 to 4, maybe almost 5 weeks of lessons, and it was a little bit of a rut, and it was, it's their first or second year, in the program. And I think that they talked back home, am I doing the right thing? Is this for me? And those parents were right there, you can do it. Listen to your teacher, just do what they're asking them to do, and they came and they said, Dr. Tindall, I'm going to try to have, a little bit of a different attitude. My mom, my dad told me to just really dig in and do this. And I thought, wow, if this might have been the pivotal moment, might not have been my teaching. It might have been their parenting.
Absolutely.
It might have been that little bit of extra support during that freshman or sophomore year that said, go this way and listen to what that guy's telling you to do. And, don't try to synthesize anything that he's saying. Just do exactly what they're doing, what they're telling you to do, and trust the process, So I think, I'm so glad that I had supportive parents, because the music field is a tough field to be in. It's a tough field to be successful in, and you need that backing. You need somebody along the way that believes in you just as much as yourself, or maybe even more than yourself. It kind of helps you through those tough periods of learning. And I'm sure you deal with it on a big level. Being in athletics.
Yeah, there are so many times when I will say to them or to their parents or to our coaching staff, if only they would have the confidence in themselves that I have in them, and so the more they can get that, I think, in general, I think that's key. And hearing it from your parents,
right?
It's super helpful. And then if you look at the other side, if the parents do go down that road of, man, this doesn't sound right, it doesn't sound like they're doing the right things for you, or you should be swimming faster, or whatever, that can be so detrimental and
totally.
can really undercut the relationship.
Right.
So I'm blessed that we have a very supportive parent team.
Yep.
And they've really let us do our thing as coaches, and they kind of work in the back scenes. And when we go to competitions, they're there to support and provide great energy, and otherwise, they're really supportive.
That's good. I think that my colleagues at Frost would also say that. I hear my colleagues mention often, how they come to know the students' parents, through concerts, or they come to visit once or twice a year, and they love the support system that they see in place, and just how much, that it's all part of a package of designing the musician or the young person that we're trying to send out into the world. We'll start to wrap it up here. I always bring this up with students that the benefits to studying music are far greater than if you become an employee of music or an employer of music later on in your life. Where else do you learn to be a problem solver? Where else do you learn to be a doer? Where else do you learn to be a follower, a leader? You name, there's so many great, characteristics that you kind of take upon yourself, and you figure some life lessons out along the way in the journey, whether you become a professional musician or not. So I'm very curious. Are there some things that you tell your athletes there? Obviously they're, maybe I'm not as familiar with the career trajectory of being a professional swimmer, but at some point you don't swim for a living when you're 50, right?
Absolutely.
So, what are some of the things that you tend to try to instill, in your students through the embodiment of learning how to swim and compete at a high level?
I think, first of all, a lot of it is just the appreciation of the opportunities, and like we talked about at the beginning, the environment that we have here, and the support that we get from the athletic department and all of the different avenues, just appreciating that opportunity. And as you continue to progress through life, continue to appreciate what you have. Another thing that we just talked with each class about is the special opportunity that they have to be part of a great team culture. And that's something that for most people, I don't think you get to experience very much in your life, is to be part of a team that's all working together to accomplish something great. Whether you accomplish it or not, being able to reflect 10 years later down the road of, man, when I was in college on a team, we worked together, we did this, and this, we had this struggle, we had this challenge, we overcame it. And it was one of the most special experiences of my life. And, I think that's something that they can really need to really cling on to and invest in. There are some things that we don't really have to point out to them that they're going to experience. They all have tremendous time management skills, even the ones on the team that don't have our best time management skills, I think probably have some of the best time management skills in the world.
Right.
And then,
Yeah.
the other part is, and I'm sure this is prevalent in your realm, is the ability to have defeats and to experience success and learn how to how to respond to both of those.
Right. Yeah, I'm always telling my students, they look up to you as mentor and a coach, and they probably just read our accomplishments on our biographies, right? But I'm always telling them, man, if you knew all the things that I failed at doing, on my journey to get to where I'm at, I have students that have won competitions that I entered in myself when I was a student, and I never made it out of the semifinal round, and here they are winning those things. I tell them, and this is huge. You gotta, embrace this. You're accomplishing things, and likewise when my students fail, saying, hey, I've been there, I've failed, and it was what I did after that failure that led to my success. And I'm sure that you feel the same way. You've probably failed at more things than you succeeded at in your career.
For sure. And I'm a huge, I don't know if you've heard of John Wooden, who was the coach.
Absolutely. At UCLA.
Yeah. Huge fan of his. And I think, if I remember right off the top of my head, I think he had been there, I want to say like 15 years before they really started making the NCAA tournament. People don't really see that side of it. Everyone knows that, they won 12 in a row and all of those things.
Right.
But if you read his things, he had to learn a lot on the way there. And
right. Right.
It's a great example of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Another part of being the coach and the professor and everything, that comes into our job, of getting these students to where we hope that they want to be,
Sure.
So. Yeah, well, I'll wrap this.
Go
ahead.
If I can, I do have a couple curiosity questions for you.
Absolutely.
How many tuba players do you have that you work with?
Right now there's 13 in our studio, so I've got 9 tuba players and 4 euphonium players. So the euphonium is like the small tuba. It's pitched more like a trombone, and those are primarily used in the military band, or a brass band in the United Kingdom. So I usually run about anywhere from a dozen to 14 at the University of Miami in the studio. Yep.
And how does that compare to other universities?
That's pretty standard. Some places are bigger. I've got one of my good friends is the tuba professor up at the Florida State University. Not supposed to mention our rivals, but his studio, I think, is like 28 to 30. Wow. But they've got a much larger school of music and more bands than we have. It's kind of suited to around the ensemble needs of each program. So at the Frost School, we've got 2 bands, 1 orchestra, a marching band. So things like that, needing to fill some of those positions and those roles. So, and of course, we're always trying to take the best musicians. We're a community of musicians at the Frost School, and regardless of your major, we're trying to build that community up. So. And
when they're coming in, are they pretty locked into, they want to do the marching band, or they want to pursue a certain thing, or some of them kind of open and you get to guide them that way?
Yeah, most of them are pretty locked in, that they want to play, they either want to be a euphonium soloist or play in a military band, one of the premier bands in Washington, D.C., or tuba players. I would say just about all of my tuba players, they come in with the aspiration of wanting to win a professional orchestra job, or become a college professor at the university level. Some of my masters or doctoral students are there to kind of do finishing type of school work, work on that career. So,
and then the other thing,
specialized.
The other thing I was thinking as I was, thinking through this and the similarities and what we do, we are trying to coach many different disciplines in the pool. Mm-hmm. Certainly there are some similarities, a lot of similarities that run through them, but a 50 freestyler can be quite a bit different than a 200 flyer. It could be quite a bit different than a distance freestyler. Yeah. would you be able to coach, or, I don't know if you would call it coach, to mentor other instruments? And what's the span of that? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, a musician is a musician, right? I mean, we all hear music, and we all, know certain attributes, about the music, or what constitutes a great performance. I mean, I can listen to a violinist play and hear different, make problems with their time, or their rhythm, or their pitch, or the consistency of the starts of their notes, or maybe their sound is off, or to my own ears. And I'm always telling my own students, go play for other musicians. Go play for somebody who is not a tuba player. Because those are the people sitting on the panels hiring you. It's not other tuba players. So go play for that trombone player. Go play for that violinist. Go play for the oboe player. And learn to tick everybody's box. So. Yeah, I mean, as far as am I able to coach and work with any other instruments? Absolutely. I've had a lifetime of being, being a musician. And some of the best lessons that I've ever taken were from non-tuba players, or playing for, I play for my colleagues. Sometimes, some of the best comments in the world come from my colleague Craig Morris, who's the professor of trumpet, in the Frost School, okay. And just hearing his approach on, maybe what he hears, coming out of my bell or a student's performance, it's always refreshing. So, and we have such a unique roster. I'm so blessed to work with the colleagues that I do at the Frost School. There's such a wide array of experience and, breadth of knowledge there, so we're really blessed to, have the best of all worlds, and students are totally free. We call it, there's no silos at our school. There's nothing holding you within a program. If you want to go experience jazz, you can, or if the jazz players want to experience classical, they can, or, any kind of genre of, rock to contemporary to classical, you name it, it's totally open. And we're always encouraging the students to kind of craft their own portfolio while they're there. So now's the time in their life to experiment and figure it out.
That's great. Like I said, I have a ton of respect. I'm very envious. I can't play an instrument, and I know it required many hours to get to where you are, but I'm very envious of you to be able to pick up an instrument and hear music the way you do.
Oh, well, likewise with you and your program, I think there's that 10,000 hour rule, that, I think it's Erickson, talks about, you need 10,000 hours of doing the right thing, right, to master something. I tell my students, you can be putting in the hours, but if you're doing the wrong thing, you're compounding those hours. You need to put the hours in doing the right thing, So, likewise, I'm very envious, of watching, how you guys do your thing, and always trying to pick up little tidbits here and there of how to do what I do a little bit more successfully. So it's been encouraging to talk with you. I thank you for your time, and it's a pleasure to be your colleague across the patio deck, I guess we could say. But
absolutely.
Yeah, you've got a great program and a lot of success, and you're well known, across the country and the world. So thank you for being a part of the University of Miami.
Thank you. This has been great. And, if we're ever playing our music too loud during workout, feel free to come over and tell us to turn it down. Hopefully it's
never.
But yeah, thank you so much for the time. This was great. And would love to continue to stay in connection. Great.
We will do that. All right. Thanks so much, Coach Andy. And for those of you who are listening with us, thank you for joining. We hope that you took a lot away, and we'll see you on the next podcast.